Okay, so after a little break, energy drink and bar, back to work. Okay, and we've started. It's on the lift, and the first plan of attack was to remove the wrap and start with the door piece. So if we start with the door piece that gets mounted on there, going to mount it on temporarily with screws and fit that right, and then I can move on to the quarter panel so that I can fit it down there. It looks like right now I'm going to have to cut part of the side skirt down a little bit and then have the other piece cut up, met to it. But I found that the car is not only wrapped, but it also has PPF on the entire car, which is awesome if you weren't wrapping it, awesome if you weren't molding it. If we were just double-siding it on, it would have been perfect, but all that has to get removed. So I started with half the quarter panel, and then I decided, okay, well, the entire thing has to come off. So we'll have to remove the PPF from the door, from the quarter panel, from the bumper, from the front fender, and from the front bumper, a lot. So I have a buddy coming over to here that needs a couple bucks, so he's going to be doing that tomorrow. So what I'm going to do now is I started removing the taillights so I can remove the bumper. I don't want the bumper intruding the mounting of the body kit, since the bumper is not the same fitment. So we're going to mount the flare on there without the bumper, cut it to the body line of the, we're going to cut it right here where this is at on the flare, and then I can mount that flare onto there and the piece separate, and then I'll have to fiberglass in between the two. Okay, so after my little snafu, so the point of taking the bumper off is so that I can get this fitted exactly where I need it to be at, and then use the actual thing to cut where I need it to cut, instead of guessing where I'm going to cut. So that'll help this lay out perfectly. I can actually, I'm going to screw it on, 2 screws to hold it, because that'll get filled in later. Biggest thing is going to be down here, cutting all this off. One thing is I did remove the side skirt because it wasn't placed correctly. It was a little too far backwards. It was a little too far this way and not high enough. It wasn't sitting even. So that was a little bit of a bitch to take off because of the double-sided tape. For right now, it's got 1 screw up front, and then it's got a screw on the top here, which we're going to be cutting off, and then a screw underneath just to hold it in with some strong tape here. So you can see that tape line is probably where I'm going to be cutting it. And then same thing with this one. Reason being is you can see where the widened area kind of stops right about there, so that it should be pretty close to being flush to the panel. And we can cut it, add a flange to it, good to go. So I'm going to cut this piece up right about there, and which I think is just a little long, but hopefully it's good. We'll cut it right there and then kind of get it set up, and hopefully we can cut them evenly and then just do a little body work afterwards, and then we'll cut the back as well. But I can't cut the back until the front is where we need it, so I can get every placements good and the gap good, door to quarter panel, all that stuff. So we want to make sure that this gap is good all the way through. So I did add some screws in it just to kind of hold it in place, because those all get filled when we panel bond it on. Right now it looks like we have a little bit of a overlap right here, so that'll have to get trimmed off. But everything else is really flush all the way around it. And yeah, so that's where we're at. I'm gonna cut that first, put it up here, see if we can get it to line up, and cut up that, and then screw that bad boy on there. All right, well, first cut of many. Let's see how this lines up. So you can see how this is going to kind of look here. where this lines up to on the back. It's gonna be pretty close to that back edge. Got it pretty close up here for right now. And so my tape line was a little off, but so I kind of set it up there, and that's where my tape line's gonna start out at. Probably just go slightly a bit above it, and then just kind of work to it. So then we're gonna have to add a flange. So right now there's no flange there. No flange at all other than the beginning. So we'll have to add a little bit of flange there that meets up to the two pieces. All right, so now we take this back off. I'm gonna cut that. Try not to get a crazy amount of dust inside the car, sadly. And kind of keep fitting it back and forth. Okay, so I didn't show you this, but I got really lucky, and you can just believe me, because I did. And I cut it, and it lines up like perfectly. So you can see, of course, this is all the way in. This is screwed in right there. We're gonna have to add some filler right here to make this flush. Gonna have to add some fiberglass and filler to the backside there. So not too drastically different, at least on the outside section. But yeah, so we'll have to add some filler on the backside to make a flange here, because you can see how weak that is. Same thing here. We'll have to add a flange underneath that, so it has somewhere to bolt into. But yeah, so a little bit of trimming back there. But yeah, this is perfect. So this lines up great all the way through here. Got my screw up here just to hold it temporarily. We're gonna use these to hold it for when we panel bond it on. Same thing, so it stays flush, and then I can fill them afterwards, no big deal. But our gap is really good. It's actually quite a big gap. It's bigger from the factory than this gap is, so we're really good. Like I said, I'm gonna have to trim this off a little bit. You can kind of see right there, there's a little bit of extra off the flange there. So it'll get a little bit bigger on the top, but everything else is like super nice. So pretty good right through here, just one little block probably. Also, you can see that there's a little bit of a gap right through here. So when this gets pulled together with panel bond, should hold it good. And then if I need to do any filler out here, we can do that as well. Now, I'm doing these doors crazy. This is all gonna be filled with panel bond inside here. I'm gonna have to cut and do the quarter panel first before this gets put on 100%. So we'll have to put the new wheels on and cut everything up, make sure it airs out properly and doesn't get stuck anywhere. And then these can get panel bonded. But until then, still a lot more work to do. Next thing to do is now take this back off. Now that I have my holes in everywhere, take this back off. I'm gonna remove this bracket so that I can get up behind here and score the back of this exactly where I want it to be at, so I can cut it. I've also, this side's cut out, and then I cut the actual vent area out, so the customer wants it to be completely flat because it already has that vent in the bumper. And then just repeated the same thing on this side. So everything's mounted up, got the vent cut out and ready for that. So we'll take that back off, fiberglass it from the back. This is all good down here. Now this area down here sinks in a little bit more than this one does for right now. So we'll have to build up a little bit of body filler here, and then same thing down in this whole area. Made the little pieces that go back behind there so we can get that thing panel bonded on. I decided I'm probably going to trim this and cut that and then squeeze that in instead of trying to fill this whole thing up. All right, so these are panel bonded on now. These are permanent. So you can see the panel bond up inside here, but it is through the entire thing, all the way back through it. Filled in the gap along the edge here nicely, so now that can be sanded down, and when it's done it'll look like one full piece. So probably not going to do a whole bunch of body work on this seam here. That's why I filled a lot of it in with panel bond, so that I can give a nice transition, but I'm not going to make it seamless. Otherwise you'd have to fill it from way out here to kind of get that transition to smooth over into it. So it's going to show that it's a wide body, but not be a hard line or bolted, or you'll know that it was molded. I still got to refill all these screw holes. Those were on there for when we installed it, and then good to remove it. Also, you can see my lines here. These are where I'm going to cut out. Hard 4 on the Teslas in the rear here. There's not much area. You can see the gap here, door gap to there. I won't have a lot of extra room there for the install of the flare. So that's gonna be a little tricky because we want to have as much clearance there. I don't want to be hitting there, but we'll have to be tricky working that section out. And we go over to the front, have marked the front out as well. So first things first is I'm gonna cut this out, at least for the front section, cut the entire thing out really close here. You gotta be careful with that. I might have to trim some more of that later once the bumper's off the car. And then we'll remove the bumper, put the flare on it, and get the flare mocked up, and then be able to mark from backside and cut the front off. Now what I'm gonna do is right now, also you can see I have fixed the, wow. You can see I've fixed the vent section. So we're not gonna have any vent on the flares themselves because the bumper has the vent. So I cut that up and we fiberglassed it from the back. A bunch of fiberglass back there. And now we're gonna install these and fit a piece right here. So I'll show you that in a minute. Okay, quickly you can see again the fiberglass on the back side here all filled in, but I wanted to show you this section down here. So this black section is what I took off of the side skirt. So that's what I cut off the side skirt so we can fit it down there. And so I've panel bonded that in, and then I also backed it with foam so we don't get a lot of dirt and rocks and all that shit down behind there. And then I filled in the edge with some body filler after it was panel bonded in there. So now we have more of a service area to bond to the car on the bottom section, because before it would have just been this white area. So now this whole area will be able to be panel bonded on, have more strength to it, and no hardware needed. So now we have the flare back on, and what I want to fill in is this gap right here. One, I want a nice flat surface so the bumper and that new flare extension can sit flush to it, just like original. Also, I wanted something that I can mount the bumper into the flare so that this section and this section always stay even and don't go in and out. This one doesn't unclip because there won't be a place for this to be mounted anymore since this tab is going to get cut off. And it won't be easy to get back behind the bumper flare section. So I want to be able to mount it straight up or down and keep these pieces in line. Also, I don't want this to have any movement like that. And it probably won't when this is all panel bonded on, but I also want a stronger surface here. I don't want anyone like washing the car and flexing the fiberglass, I don't know, bumping into it, all that. So I'm gonna fill this gap on both sides. To do that, I made a template out of some paperboard, just thin paper. Then cut out, I have this extra carbon fiber sheet material, 1/4 inch thick, and I made my templates, or my pieces. And so those are just gonna get panel bonded in. So I think this is the other side actually, but I'm gonna get them up in there like that. And so I'll have a nice completely flat surface bonded in. And so I've got the piece up underneath there. If you can, there you go, focus a little bit. Pieces up in there, panel bonded in, just piece of tape just to hold it level there. And did the same thing on this side. Hopefully this side goes okay, because this one was a little bit more tricky, had a little bit more of a gap, wasn't so tight. So yeah, now I already had fun and took off the front bumper because that's normal basic work. You don't need to see that. It was a little pain in the ass because we can't get the frunk open, or the frunk tub off from the airbag setup. But bumper's off. I got the fiberglass mat up here so we don't get sparks and everything. I'm gonna cut away. I already did cut the front bumper. So edge is cut out. I had to take off the sensor plastic piece, so that just gets just heated up in the back, and pry that off. So that's gonna get put onto the new outer fiberglass piece. and then trim this whole thing out so that I'm probably going to panel bond that back up in there somewhere so we can actually have a fender liner again, at least partial fender liner. We'll see. Looks like we already have to fix some of this because the plastic broke on its own from something else before me. You can see that piece is broken there. But bumper's cut, sensor's out and ready. So next thing is let's cut it up and then start fitting that flare on. All right, so I'm going to grind that up and smooth that out a little bit, but you can tell where I cut is just about perfect because this is where the tire is going to rest onto. It's not going to go any higher than that and follows that curve pretty close to where the headlight's at all the way around. So I'm going to trim this off a little bit straighter right here. But yeah, clean up the edge. We'll paint the edge so it doesn't rust. Cut the other side.